Welcome back, everybody, to Paulie's Kitchen. Last time was Bananas Foster. Today, Jambalaya. We're going to start off by putting on a little of Professor Longhair. Professor Longhair is was an iconic New Orleans musician. And if you remember the first time, last week or 2 weeks ago, when we made the Bananas Foster, we were talking a little bit about the second line drummers and the beat and the rhythm that really makes New Orleans what it is. Professor Longhair is an amazing piano player in the 40s and the 50s and really sort of put together all that was down in this great crescent city of New Orleans and put it together with the drums and the bongos and of course his amazing piano playing. This song is called Tipitinas. Tipitinas is an iconic song made and created by Professor Longhair in the early 50s, late 40s. It's also the namesake for one of the best clubs maybe in all the world called Tipitinas. You can hear Professor Longhair's voice, his playing, that second line beat. And really, I think a lot of the early rhythm and blues musicians, including Elvis Presley, sort of were listening to what was coming out of New Orleans in the very early 50s, including Professor Longhair, and the beat, the voice, the wonderful rhythms that he was putting together. I'm going to pour a little bit of wine in the meantime, you guys listening to Professor Longhair. So you get the idea. That's Jambalaya music, ladies and gentlemen. One of the easiest dishes I know is jambalaya. Jambalaya. I get choked up every time I think about making it. Basically, it's a 15-minute dish that can linger on your taste buds for days on end. And there's basic 3 ingredients, and everything else is kind of a mix and a mesh. Not to be confused with gumbo or etouffee. Jambalaya is sort of a country dish. It comes out of Africa, hence the word Jambalaya, which when it was brought over in the 17th century by the slaves that came over, went out into the countryside, the Cajun country of Louisiana, the Bayou country, and then mixed with the French Acadians who came down from Canada, mixed and blended with the Native Americans as well that were living down in Louisiana. You have this kind of new kind of jambalaya, which is what we call Cajun jambalaya. The Creole jambalaya is coming out of Africa, a lot of the French colonies, because the major ingredient, folks, andouille sausage. You cannot even talk about jambalaya without andouille sausage. Andouille sausage is a pork sausage. It is spicy and hot. Obviously from France originally, but now Louisiana has its own version of an andouille sausage. So when the French Acadians came down from Quebec, the eastern townships, down the Mississippi, down the Atlantic, into Louisiana, because of course it was part of the French colonies, right? Louisiana Purchase was sold to the States by Napoleon because he basically needed money to fight more of his wars in the 1810s, 20s, and 30s. I'm going to put on some Dr. John while we're going into this. Dr. John is one of my favorites, passed away recently. Just got to get through the commercials on the YouTube, you know what I'm saying? There we go. That'll be Dr. John, iconic Louisiana, New Orleans figure and a great, great musician. So he's going to be playing Iko Iko, which is a classic Mardi Gras song. But we don't want this stuff to burn because my skillet is on the stove right now and it's heating up. Because remember what we said, you got to keep everything nice and hot on a big flame because everything goes quick. So let's talk about the Louisiana Purchase. The French came down settled in New Orleans, but some settled out in the countryside. They become Cajuns from the word Acadiana, mixed with Native Americans and the African slaves that were freed also in the 19th, 18th, 19th century, mixing all of those cultures, blends of music, food, spices, and everything else. So jambalaya takes on its own essence when the Cajuns pick it up. It's now going to be called Cajun jambalaya as opposed to Creole jambalaya. This is an earthy dish made to eat with a wine or beers, Dixie beer. And this thing can last for days. Put in the refrigerator. It's got tomato sauce in there as well, so it kind of mixes and meshes in with all the great foods. It's simple, and you always got to prepare in advance, because prepping is what it's all about. I'm going to let you listen to Dr. John for just a second. Another iconic piano player. He was going to play guitar, Dr. John, but he got into a nasty fight and he got his finger blown off. And so he couldn't do the neck well, so he went over to piano, and of course he becomes one of America's iconic rhythm and blues New Orleans piano players. I left one thing still not complete, and that of course is our shrimp. So as I say, jambalaya has its base of andouille sausage, Cajun seasoning, which I'll get to in just a moment. And of course, you can put your shrimp in there. Now this is a true Gulf shrimp as opposed to shrimp from somewhere else in the world. This particular shrimp is from the Gulf of Mexico, which is farmed out by the Cajun folks out there on the Bayou country, Lafayette, Louisiana. And it's a large shrimp, you can see. Not quite a prawn, but it's a nice size. And the reason I didn't cut it up yet is I want to show you it's real easy. I take a knife, I cut the tail off, and I peel it back. Got to peel that back a little bit, and you separate it out from the shell. You throw this out because that can get real nasty, right? And then what you do is you start to chop that up. Once that's chopped up and your skillet is nice and hot, you're ready to go. Now, I got a problem. I don't know how to pause this thing, and I wouldn't anyway. I would go right through. 15 minutes, we're eating, we're sitting down. So it's a quick dish. You just got to move it and make sure that everything's going 1, 2, 3, 4. Very quickly before I get to the cooking part, you got jambalaya, which is what I call the less sophisticated of the three dishes. You've got gumbo. You've heard of gumbo. Gumbo is always made with rice. Also crawfish and a lot of crab, where jambalaya usually doesn't have the crawfish and the crab. It's andouille sausage based, usually with shrimp and chicken, but the gumbo always has rice. Now we're going to cook this today with couscous. I like to use couscous. It's a little bit lighter than the rice, but of course it melds and meshes all that wonderful taste in together, and it's a quick dish as well because it all gets cooked in with the couscous, which is a wonderful thing. And the third dish is the etouffee. So you got the jambalaya, the gumbo, which is always made with rice and usually with crawfish and also crab. And then of course you got the third dish, which is an etouffee. We're going to probably do all three of these as time goes on, or the other two, but today we're focusing on jambalaya. And the etouffee is a slightly more sophisticated dish, always based around crab meat, but we'll get to that at another time. So, the first thing I'm going to do is take a sip of my wine. Turn up Dr. John. His real name was Mac Rebenack. Mac Rebenack. And he brought the whole culture of voodoo. Louisiana, New Orleans is big on the cult of voodoo that came in from the Caribbean, from the South, brought up from the ships and the slaves that came in, and the folks from the Caribbean that settled in New Orleans. And he practiced voodoo. There's a lot of practicing folks down there that practice voodoo, that are into the occult. And there's lots of museums you can go to down in New Orleans in the French Quarter that you can visit this stuff and really get a feel for what that's all about. It's pretty cool, actually. So you guys got to have an open mind to it all. Speaking of open minds, I'm going to very quickly cut up my shrimp before my skillet gets too hot. You always do it whole. There's, as I say, this is a very earthy dish, so you don't want to take out the spine in the middle. There's no reason for that. It all gets cooked in together. So, do this real quick for you so we don't spend too much time. But I didn't cut it, I didn't prep it, because I wanted to show you about the size that you want these things cut. It's about that size right there, right? Because that way, when you're finished eating it, it's just the right bite size to kind of mix with your chicken, which I have pre-cut, and your andouille sausage. So that thing all mixed together with the salty taste of the shrimp and the Gulf shrimp, and it really gets you a good thing going on. I'm going to turn that down for a minute. We were there last time with the Neville brothers. They're back on today on the YouTube channel there that I use. But I'll probably go back to Dr. John so you can hear some of that voodoo music that he brought to fame. He kind of came up a little bit later than Professor Longhair. He learned from Professor Longhair, but he came up in the 60s, which was lucky for Dr. John, because a lot of the sort of acid music, the Grateful Dead, even Janis Joplin and so forth, were mixing with his voodoo music, which is also very trippy. So that all combined, and he really had a nice career early on, Dr. John. A couple things stutter-stepped with him, drugs, alcohol, but he overcame it all. But as I say, he passed away last year, which was really sad because he was one of my favorites. So I'm going to turn up the Neville Brothers. That's that funky beat. This is Iko Iko, which is a rendition of the Dr. John song. These are all Mardi Gras songs. Iko Iko, you probably heard, there's about 100 renditions of Iko Iko. These are the Mardi Gras songs that revolves around different neighborhoods in New Orleans. And the neighborhoods used to fight each other, you see, for control of the turf. This is in the 19th century, 1800s. And all the neighborhoods would form around their leader, their Big John or their Big Chief. And they would sort of emulate the Native Americans as well, dressing up in their garb and so forth. So Iko, this song is actually a song about one of those neighborhoods. And Brother John was the sort of the head person who got caught up in a battle during the Mardi Gras period and died. These are all legends. It's New Orleans. You know, everything is legends, but the music survives, and that's what's the most important thing. So I'm going to turn down the Neville Brothers. Jambalaya is 3 phases. It's just like music, right? The first thing you do when you play an instrument is you got to sit down and tune it up. Make sure it's okay in key. So the first level of that will be right here. That's going to be the chicken, my flavoring. You can buy it. I make it. I think I have it here. Yeah, here's Cajun Spice Blend. Emeril Lagasse has one. This is one that you can use. I kind of use my own. I put a little more pepper in there. Garlic flakes. It also has red peppers as well. Bay leaf, parsley, and all those great things. So this is phase 1 of the music. This is the tune-up. We're going to put the shrimp in the bowl for the tune-up. Shrimp got away. I got to throw them away now. See that? Shrimp got away there. And then you put the Cajun spice in that bowl. And then, of course, you put the chicken. So this is the warm-up. This is the musical warm-up. And then what you do is you take those hands of yours, right? I'm going to turn up some of the Neville Brothers. Talk about so you got to really mush that stuff real good. The smell alone can knock your socks off. Look at this. The color starts to get nice and red. That's what the Cajun sauce does, the Cajun powder. I like to really get a mush and a meld going on in there. You need it. You gotta need it. So I've been to parties where this process is what it's all about. Sometimes it'll take an hour. You got people kind of hanging out at the party, putting their shrimp and the spices and the chicken all together and kind of mixing it. But the smell permeates the house where the party is. It's a really great smell. I wish that you could smell it, but you can't. They're getting crazy, the Neville Brothers. Now, this is Jazz Fest, 1999. And they always really headline Jazz Fest, which is a great musical tradition down there. So I got a little olive oil. Remember what we said? This is the tune-up, right? We got the tune-up, right? Then we have the, well, let's go to the tune-up first. So I'm going to put this in very slowly because this thing has been heating on high heat. So the tune-up, the second phase will be the sound check. And here's the sound check, and then the third thing will be the concert. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So this thing is nice and hot, right? You can see how hot that thing is because of the smoke. Fire extinguisher. Always have a fire extinguisher when you cook in Louisiana. Now I use one of these things. You can use a wood one. And then you put that in. Listen to this. Listen to this sound, like music. See if it meshes with the Neville Brothers. Listen to this. You hear that? That's a good sound. That's the sound you want. And you don't want this to hang out too long. Just get it nice and brown. Right? It's the tune-up. Right? The tune-up. Then we do the sound check. Now the reason why you don't want to get this overcooked is because it's going to cook inside with all the good spices and everything else that's going to go in here in a minute. I like to do this for about 1 minute, and the way I check it with the color of the shrimp. Once that shrimp starts to get orange-esque, then you know you're in good shape. Orange, that's the color that you want. So that usually takes about a minute. Oh, if you could smell that, you'd understand. So I'm going to show you what I mean. You can see right here. So that shrimp is getting nice and orange. You see it? But you don't want to go more than a minute because, as I say, this is going to cook real nice for the next 15 minutes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my wine, turn up the Neville Brothers again. Again. And now we go, remember what we said, that's the tune-up. Now we go to the sound check. Andouille sausage. Pop that right in there. You can't do anything in Louisiana with andouille sausage. I live on this stuff. Ask my wife, I bring this stuff home all the time. I love andouille sausage. Then we put in this. So this is garlic, 2 cloves of garlic, half a cup of pepper, chopped pepper, onions, you see that? Put that right in there. So remember, onions, garlic, half a cup of pepper, half a cup of onions, and 2 cloves of garlic. Mix that in real good. The song here is called Audubon Zoo, and that's the big zoo in New Orleans, Audubon Park and Audubon Zoo. And they have a great song, the Neville Brothers, where it's a song about kind of going to the zoo and all the animals are asking for you. And it's a great song. They play it at every concert. It's kind of like a New Orleans tradition, one of those traditional songs about the zoo, about Audubon Park, again paying homage to this great city. I'm going to switch that out to Yellow Moon. Yellow Moon was their breakout, I shouldn't say breakout, one of their great albums. And it's truly, for me, one of the best albums I think ever made. You're going to hear a little bit of this, Yellow Moon, while this thing is cooking.
And the musical director of this show, Mr. Herbie Hancock.
So we're going to let this thing go for about another 30 seconds. Remember, we're going to turn it up high. This is Yellow Moon. So every year, New Orleans has a great festival called the Jazz Fest. The Jazz Fest has been going on now since the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s. I've been to a lot of them when I lived down there, and then I think I've been to one after I left. I went back down there with a couple of my friends to go to the Jazz Fest. It's a 4-day event. It's kind of like one of those festivals along with Mardi Gras and the Strawberry Festival, things like that, that really kind of kick off this great New Orleans music scene where all the great local bands and musicians come together to jam, to play on the stages of the Jazz Fest. So if you haven't been down, you got to do that. So this thing is about ready. You can smell it. I'm going to show you what we got here. So give me a second here. I want to tell you something that it's a real easy dish. I mean, look what we've done. We've done chopped up andouille sausage, chopped up shrimp, chopped up chicken, half a cup of green pepper, half a cup of onions, and garlic. That's it, folks. And already the smell is more than one can bear. That's all we did. So remember what I said. We got the tuna, then we got the sound check. Now we do the concert. We do the full-on thing. So I'm going to tell you what we're throwing in here so you guys have an idea. And I'll put it in one by one. The first thing I'm going to do is I chopped up about 4 plum tomatoes. Now, normally I would use tomatoes from the garden, but it's a little too early here in New Jersey. We got about another month left. So I had to buy these, unfortunately, because that's such a shame. But now you're going to stir that in there. The other thing I wanted to mention is always make sure you have a solid skillet, and a skillet that has a lid. I'm making a lot here. I'm making for about 8 people. But I want to say that you can make less, but you have to have that lid because once that couscous goes in, as you know, couscous cooks within its own beautiful sauce. Oh. You can smell the Gulf of Mexico. There we go. I'm going to shake that up a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the hot sauce. I use Louisiana hot sauce. You can use Tabasco. By the way, Tabasco is out of Iberia, Louisiana. It's the iconic sauce. I prefer this one. This is what you find on all the tables in Louisiana. And you don't want to put too much of that thing because that stuff will burn. As we say, it's no joke. Put that in. Then you're going to do a little bit of this. This is also a staple, a very important product. This is Worcestershire sauce. Lee and Perrins was the classic. That's what we used in the restaurant in Begay's in the French Quarter. That was the name of our restaurant. But now I use Annie's. It's an organic blend. I like it a little bit better. It's got a little less salt rather, so it doesn't overwhelm. Look at this. I got to mix that in. Now it's going to start turning brown because we got the hot sauce with the Worcestershire sauce. Put that in. Then we got to go for the salt, the pepper, and the chicken stock. So you can use a stock. That's what I use. I'm going to put that right in there, cool everything down. That's about a cup 1 cup of chicken stock. You can never use too much because it's all going to get, you know, it's all going to get mixed in with the couscous and dissipate, so eventually it'll all kind of go down to where it needs to be. I got these bay leaves. I overdo it always on the bay leaves. I do 6. Yeah, they all went in, I think. Yep, I do 6. I like bay leaves. I like what they do for the flavor of a jambalaya. It's kind of a unique thing. So that's what I do. I'm going to turn this off because now they're jamming. And it's maybe a little bit too much here for me. So I'm going to try to go back to some of the classic stuff here. Give me 1 second. We're taking a break. This is a break in the midst of it all. See if I can get another little Dr. John. There we go. This is actually Dr. John. Here, this is even better. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Well, I'll just leave this going. It's kind of a shame because it's actually David Letterman, which I don't really want to use, but it's too much and I got to keep going here. Okay, so a little bit of pepper. 1, 2. Sea salt. Don't use anything else but sea salt. Put it on there. Got that much. Put it in there. And then we're going to let this cook up just for a moment. Kind of let all these beautiful things blend in. You see I still got it up on the high heat. Those bay leaves now are cooking in real good. Obviously you take out the bay leaves when you're ready to eat. So I think we covered everything here. It's going to be ready in about 5 minutes, so you want to start to set your table now. The best thing to use for a good jambalaya, because you're going to have sort of this broth, I like to use this. It's not really a bowl. It's kind of what you would eat pasta in, right? So this is like your classic, in my opinion, your classic jambalaya dish. Kind of dish. So now that's all that's all going crazy. We got the smells cranking. Everything's working for us. You want to kind of check it, make sure everything is in order, that the shrimp are happy, right? And if they're not trying to get out of the skillet, they're all happy. They know that they're going to make you feel good. So we're going to mix that up a little bit. So now we do the final thing, which of course is the couscous. Now, I'm putting a little bit more than I normally would. For if you're making this at home, you want to make a little bit less. You want to do 1 cup. I'm doing 2 cups. So as you all know, when you do couscous, you got to turn down the heat, right? You got to mix it in. Watch this. You got to mix it in. It's going to cool down. You got to mix it in. I always go over here and look back at my ingredients. Make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Look at this. Look at this. Right in there. It's a beautiful thing. Heat's got to be off, folks. You can now take it off the heat because that couscous has to crank in and cook in with everything else. So that's 2 cups of couscous, right? Just a beautiful thing. This thing is just a beautiful thing. Now, watch this. Here we go. I'm going to show you what I got here in a minute. Now we put it back on here. Got to cover it. Cover it and you let it go the classic 5 minutes. I always set my timer and I'll tell you why in just a moment. If you don't set your timer, you can really make this thing too soggy and too soft. You want to let the couscous marry, mix in, get together, make love to the shrimp and the chicken and all those wonderful spices and the andouille. And the only way to do that is to time it. Because if that thing goes more than 5 minutes, what you're going to have in the end is soup. And you don't want soup, you want a couscous jambalaya. So that's very important. I got that timer on 5 minutes. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pour a little bit more of the wine. I'm going to talk to you just for a moment while that thing is going about some of these ingredients. This is a staple that you want on your table. If you're going to start to cook Louisiana style, always have a hot sauce. Hot sauce gives that little extra kick. Most of the time people will eat with a beer or drink a beer with their gumbo or etouffee or jambalaya. I prefer wine. I don't know why, but I've kind of developed more of a taste of wine, probably because of the tomato. But this thing's got to go in it, folks. So even though we're putting it into our jambalaya, you want to have it on the table. That's really important. The other thing is this Worcestershire sauce. This is really important as well. People take this for granted. A lot of cooks don't use this anymore. But I use it all the time, and it's a really great thing to use when you're cooking Louisiana style. There'll be a couple of other dishes that we'll use this for, or use this with as well. I think I covered everything pretty much. Now we're just waiting for this thing to happen. I want to sign off after it's ready so you can see it and kind of feel it with me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put on a classic Tom Waits song. Called A Pocket Full of Bourbon. I love Tom Waits. Now, Tom Waits is not from New Orleans, as you know. This is called Jockey Full of Bourbon, I'm sorry. But this song was actually used for a wonderful movie that was made, filmed in New Orleans called Down by Law. It's a Jim Jarmusch film. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. You should get it on Netflix. It's a classic Jarmusch film that deals with three guys down and out in New Orleans that end up at the OPP, Orleans Parish Prison. OPP is an iconic prison down in New Orleans where everybody kind of spends a day or two, because even if you're having a rough time on Mardi Gras and you kiss the police officer's girlfriend out on St. Charles Avenue, that could get you a day in jail, as it did with my friend. And we had to bail him out. Of course, we thought he was kidding. He only had a dime. That's the days when you had to drop a dime. You only had one dime and one call. Of course, you're supposed to call your lawyer, but he called us. We were out on Mardi Gras Day, so a bit woozy to say the least. And he said, I'm in jail, OPP, come get me. And we said, you've got to be kidding. And we hung up the phone, and 3 days later we realized our buddy still is not back at our house. So something's got to be wrong. So we figured that phone call was the real deal. So it just goes to show you, don't try to play with the officer's girlfriend. Just pass her by if you know who she is. But this is Tom Waits, a classic song, Jockey Full of Bourbon. You can look at it on YouTube, check it out. It's just got these wonderful rhythms. He spends a lot of time in New Orleans, Tom Waits. And of course, this is the iconic Louisiana movie, New Orleans film, called Down by Law by Jim Jarmusch. So we're almost there now. Everything's getting white. Remember, it went from its raw form to pink. Remember, the shrimp was turning pink for us, kind of doing a display, orangey pink. But now, if it is doing the right thing, it should all be sort of very light and bright. When I serve it, sometimes I'll put a little sprinkle of something red, like a cayenne pepper, on top to kind of give it a little bit of a red flare with the lighter tones that you'll see in just a minute. You hear that? That's the timer. That's telling us the couscous is ready. So I'm going to turn off the music. Now, the thing with couscous, as you know, you want to turn it. Usually use a fork and you turn it. Can you see that? See how light it got? So you just want to kind of turn it. I'm going to shut that off. See that smoke? It's my hand. I'm going to try that again. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a jambalaya. That's a classic New Orleans jambalaya with couscous. This is my sort of recipe that I've gathered over the years when I was down there. Don't forget, when that shrimp goes in, make sure when it's orange, you put in the second phase. So first you got the tuna, then the second phase is the, I forgot. That's a test. What's the second phase? First is the tune-up, second is the sound check. And then the third, of course, is the concert. You put everything in together, just let it sit. That thing took me 14 minutes and 35 seconds. 14 minutes and 35 seconds. That's it. The prep took me 10 minutes, so that's 25 minutes. And now you get to sit down with a little bit of wine, little maybe cayenne pepper on top to give it a little red kick, and you're ready to go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is Paul E. in the kitchen once again, doing another New Orleans dish. Stay safe. We'll see you next time for a shrimp etouffee.